Good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeremy Walsh, and I'm the Director of Support, Training, and Documentation for BNI Connect. I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar today. Today, we start our series of webinars for leadership teams. So we just completed a series of training webinars for members over the past couple of weeks where we talked about things like filling out your profile and how to use the online slips, the social media components, and the member tools and reports. Now we're going to start with more of the leadership team roles and different things that we can do within the system, mostly for people like presidents and vice presidents, secretary treasurers, visitor hosts, people like that. Today's presentation, we're going to be talking about chapter goals for leadership teams. One of the great things about BNI Connect is that there is a way in the system where you can go in and for your chapter, establish different benchmarks for success throughout the course of your leadership team term, whether that's for the next 6 months or even for the next year. Once you establish those goals in BNI Connect, based on the PALMS report, we'll start to track those for you. So you can always go back to them and say, okay, well, did we hit our goals for last month? Do we maybe need to do something different or do something better? It also allows you to plan out your year for activities with the chapter. So we're going to take a look at that today. We also have a couple of other leadership team-based webinars coming up in the next couple of days. We also have the leadership team tools and reports. We're going to be talking about chapter web pages, and then we also have online renewals within BNI Connect all coming up in the next week or so. Before we get started with today's presentation, which again is chapter goals, a couple of housekeeping things. The first is that this is a live webinar, so if you have any questions at all, please do feel free to ask those questions. The easiest thing to do is to type your questions in. I'll see them pop up on the screen, and I'll be able to answer them as we're going through the material today. The second thing is that we're recording this live webinar so that you can go back and review it later. So let's say that you're the president of your glorious chapter, but your vice president wasn't here and you'd like to give them the information from today's webinar. You'll be able to send them a link to this recording. It will be available both on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/BNI Connect Global, as well as on our support site, support.bniconnect.com, also available by clicking this question mark in the upper right-hand corner. We're scheduled, this takes about 25 to 30 minutes to go through the material today. That being said, I am always happy to stay on the call until every single question is answered. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. And Deepti says hi. It's very nice to see you. I've seen him. I've seen you on a lot of the webinars, so thank you very much again for being here, Deepti. So to get to the goals program, what we need to do is we do need to venture beyond the home screen here. This is the home screen of BNI Connect where you do all your referrals and thank you for closed business and all of that information. But in order to get into the goals, we're going to go to the operations menu. So remember that network will bring you to the social media components or the networking components. Operations is where we go to do all of the input, and inputting goals is a place to do input. Reports, on the other hand, is going to be output only. So again, we're going to go take a look at the operations menu, and this is a chapter level function. So operations chapter. Once we're here, we'll see all our different things that we can do under the chapter operations, and what we're going to be focusing on today is managing goals. On the right-hand side, we'd see two different things. We can enter our chapter goals. Now, typically, only the leadership team can enter those goals. So that's usually, again, the president, the vice president, the secretary treasurer, and maybe the director consultant or ambassador for the chapter. Generally speaking, a member or even maybe a visitor host or a growth coordinator, they generally don't have access to actually enter the goals into BNI Connect. However, most of the time, the chapter does have access to view the chapter goals so that they can follow along with the progress that you're making throughout the year. So again, they're not going to be able to enter them, but usually they're able to view them. So to get started, what we're going to do is we're going to click on Enter Chapter Goals. The first thing that we need to do is to establish the time frame for when we're going to be working with these goals. You can set up the goals as far in the future as you want to. You can even go back into the past and edit them or change them if need be. But the important thing is that BNI Connect works on them 6 months at a time. That's just what we can fit on the screen. So you can choose which month you're going to start entering the goals for. Now, because we are in the month of November, it's assuming that we are going to work on the next 6-month BNI period that starts in April. But you can change this to whenever you want to. So if you'd like to set the goals for this month, you can go back to this month, for example. Or I can go back and start it from the beginning of this 6-month term, which is October. Again, really, it's up to you when you would like to start entering the goals for, keeping in mind it is a 6-month period that we're working on. Now, the second thing that we're going to do is we just have to do this one time. And you can see that I've already done this for the BNI Burr chapter up in Antarctica. But we have to establish a long-term vision and a mission statement for our chapter. This is kind of the, when they talk about CEOs having a 30,000-foot overview, this is kind of what we're doing for our chapter, is we're establishing this more of a long-term vision, whereas when we get into the goals themselves, that's when we're going to be really putting in the specifics. So the long-term vision is really where you want to get to, and the mission statement is kind of how you're going to get there. So the long-term vision, for example, for this chapter, the Burr chapter in Antarctic, is that we want to grow the chapter to be the largest chapter in the entire continent. In addition, we need to be the #1 chapter in closed business and referrals within a 200-mile radius. So that is our dream in the BNI Burr chapter. The mission statement, what are our guiding principles? How are we going to get there? And we're going to do this by helping members increase their business through a structured, positive, and professional word-of-mouth program. So these are really things that you can put in as a leadership team in your own words, and they can be used as a motivational tool to help get your chapter excited about growing your chapter. Once you've established these things, click the Go button. Again, I'm going to start entering goals beginning in October. And what you'll see is basically it has given us a spreadsheet that we're going to be filling out that has a bunch of different goals on them. Now, the goals are called success drivers, the chapter success drivers, and they're broken into all of the expected categories that we would have in BNI. So we have, for example, we have the attendance percentage, we have total number of one-to-ones, we have CEUs, visitors, new memberships, number of members in the chapter, number of referrals, and thank you for closed business. And what we're going to be doing is setting these goals for the next 6 months. So what targets do we want to reach? You'll notice that we also have what are called mechanisms for each goal. And what mechanisms are things that we can do in the chapter that support those goals. One of the challenges that we have, especially being on the leadership team, is that we all have limited number of hours in the week, and almost all of us have a job outside of BNI, our BNI positions. So that means that after we leave our BNI meeting, we're thinking about returning all those phone calls and catching up with clients and following up on those referrals that we were given. Planning for the chapter is something that sometimes seems to go by the wayside. So this really helps you to say, okay, well, I know I want to grow the chapter. What can I do in the month of December or in the month of January to help to support that goal? Some of them can be little things and some of them may be bigger things. And we'll get to that in just a second. Now, before we start entering these things into the spreadsheet here, we need to decide what kind of numbers we are going to be entering. Basically, whether we're going to be putting in numbers for the whole chapter or per member. Basically, do you want to put in a big number or a smaller number? And what it'll do is it'll end up, this will carry over into the view sheet. So if you end up putting in per member numbers, it will calculate a lot of them out based on your projected membership. I can tell you that most people leave these goals in as a whole chapter number. That's how most people end up thinking about them. But again, you're free to do whichever you prefer. I'm going to be leaving it as for whole chapter today. So let's take a look at some of these chapter success drivers. Now, the first one here is the attendance percentage, and that's a pretty straightforward one. Not really based on number of members or anything, just a straight percentage. So right now I'm up in the Burr chapter in Antarctica. I'm afraid we do have an attendance problem. We're only getting about 85 or so % of the members are showing up on a weekly basis. And working back from October, I actually kind of know where we were, so it makes it a little bit easier to plan this out. So let's say that our goal last month was 85%. Now, what I usually like to do is rather than go month by month, I like to kind of think about what the end result is going to be. So I know our starting result because that's where we were. And in 6 months, where do I want to get to? Do I want to get to 90%, 95%, 100%, 92%? What is that number that we'd like to try to get to? I'm going to be aggressive. I want to go from 85% to 95%. So we're going to go up a full 10 percentage points there. And now that I know the start number and the end number, now I can increment the numbers in between. So this is probably going to be 87, 89, 91, 93, and 95. So that makes it nice, easy distribution across the board here. Now, again, this is the easy method. If you would like to, you can start making this a lot more complicated, taking other things into consideration. For example, here in the United States, at least, we have a bunch of holidays coming up. We know that in December, we have Christmas, and we also have New Year's Eve. So those usually will affect attendance numbers. So maybe I don't want to be as aggressive with the attendance percentage and try to make them more adjustable to what I know to be going on in those months. Now, again, that is optional. That's a much more advanced technique to this. My personal opinion is I say get started with a simpler number, get everything in there, and then go back and make adjustments later if you have time to do so. It's better to have something in there than to keep pushing it off, trying to put in every single variable. So I'm going to personally stay with the simpler format and just work on maybe ramping up, really pushing people. For example, in December, I want to make sure that people are bringing their substitutes. So they have substitutes for the meeting. So I want to remind myself, and this is what the mechanisms are for, that in December, remind members to have subs for holiday meetings, right? What are some other mechanisms that we can use to increase attendance percentage? Well, maybe I want to make sure that the vice president is sending out all of the control letters. Now, most people won't have 1, 2, 3 absences in the first month, so I want to really start following up on that. Maybe in November, VP control letters. I want to follow up with it again in January after we've had those holiday meetings. And again, this is a way for us to plan out our year. And I can keep going back to this and saying, okay, what was it that I wanted to do in December? Oh yeah, that's right. I wanted to remind members to have subs. Now, if you're looking for ideas, things that you can use as mechanisms, up here in the top blue-gray bar, it says Chapter Goal Guide. If you click the chapter goal guide, this really is an explanation of mechanisms. So you can use any of these things as a way to really spark your memory or even just copy and paste them. So for example, an educational moment on the importance of why, or playing the BNI game, or follow-up phone calls with members. Is everything okay? I think that's a great idea, so I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to paste this into the second mechanism. Now, once you start working on this, I do recommend, just like any good Word document or Excel spreadsheet or anything you might be working on, hit the save button every once in a while, and that way it will save your changes. BNI Connect does have a 30-minute timeout. So if, let's say that you're doing this with your membership committee, maybe you got together for a leadership team meeting and you're sitting down, you're going through the goals, and you start talking about one, and a half hour goes by and you haven't entered anything, if you haven't saved it, it will vanish, it will disappear. So make sure that you hit the save button every now and again. Now, what I like to do next is I like to skip down the list a bit. There's no need to do this in order, and to be honest, some of these next mechanisms, some of these next success drivers will depend on one basic thing, and that is how big you want your chapter to be. Especially since I'm calculating whole chapter numbers, the number of one-to-ones for the chapter is going to increase by the chapter size. So I got to figure out how big I want my chapter to be first. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit and I'm going to go to number of members in chapter. This is a really important goal. So we do want to grow our chapter. And right now our chapter has 22 members in it. And we would like to fairly aggressively grow this chapter. I say we want to grow this chapter by 10 members over the next 6 months. So once again, I can put the end result here. So we want to get to 32 members by the end of March. 32 members by the end of March. So that means that we need to have a net growth of 2 new members every month. So we're going to make 24, 26, 28, 30, and 32. So this is our growth chart here for the chapter. And once again, we need to come up with some mechanisms. How are we going to concentrate on increasing the number of members in the chapter? Lots of ways we can do that. We can do that. One big way that we've always done that is with a visitors day. So we want to make sure we're planning a visitors day for the spring. Now the thing with visitors days is you do need to plan those 6 to 8 weeks in advance of when you're going to have the visitor day. So I may know that I want to do a visitor day in March, but really we need to start planning that in the end of January or February. So I want to make sure I put a reminder in for myself to do some visitor day planning. And let's see, I'm going to do visitor day planning. I'm going to do the start the visitor day process and then have the visitor day in March. So really this is reminding me month to month, what do I need to do in order to have a successful Visitors Day in our chapter? And there's plenty of other things we can do to drive membership as well, especially over the holiday period. A great idea is to play the BNI game. For those of you that don't know what the BNI game is, the BNI game is it's a fun thing that you can do with your chapter. What you do is you split your chapter into teams. Usually it's going to be 3 or 4 teams, maybe 5 teams, depending on how big your chapter is. 6 to 8 people per team. And you compete for points. So everything good that you do in the chapter is worth positive points. So let's say that showing up on time for the meeting, maybe that's worth 5 points. And bringing a visitor, maybe that's worth 15 points. Having a referral, maybe that's worth 10 points. Sponsoring a new member, maybe that's worth 50 points. All of these different point values that you can assign to it. You can find this in your, usually in your chapter manual, which you should be able to get from your regional office. Again, if you're stuck, you're looking for ideas, click on that chapter goal guide, and that will give you some more ideas of things that you can do. Now, looking at the number of members in chapter, the next thing that we have to consider really is, okay, well, that's great. I know how big I want the chapter to get, but how am I going to get there? And in order to increase the size of the chapter, we have to have new members. So let's take a look at the new member numbers. Now, logic would tell me that if I'm growing by 2 members per month, I need to bring in 2 new memberships. That's only partially true. One of the things to consider is that really every chapter out there does have attrition. And attrition is really members that leave. It would be great that if, chapter started off at 35 members and we continue to grow and we never, ever, ever lost one of our members, but it doesn't happen that way. People do leave BNI. Sometimes it's for reasons that are beyond our control. For example, they move to a different state, or they get a promotion in their job. They're no longer in sales, or maybe they sold their business, or maybe they're adding another baby to the family. Whatever it might be, people do leave BNI and can no longer make the weekly commitment. On average, the average attrition rate in BNI is about 1 member per month. So at the very least, and even in order to maintain our chapter size, we need to average 1 new member per month in order not to shrink our chapter. So we need to add that to the 2 members that we're going to be adding in order to increase our membership. So really what we're looking at is 3 new members per month. Okay, so each month we're going to try to add 3 new members. And the mechanisms, once again, how are we going to do that? Keep in mind that some of the things that we're doing in other categories may apply here as well. So I can always, if I want to, the BNI game is something that can help with new memberships because we're trying to bring in visitors and things like that. Having the Visitors Day is definitely something that will increase memberships. Maybe making sure that the visitor orientation process is being followed. That's another thing that you can do to increase new memberships. All right, so now that we know how big we want our chapter to be, we know how many people we need to induct into the chapter to do that, the next thing to look at is, where do new members come from? New members come from visitors. Visitors are the lifeblood of our chapter. Even the ones that never join BNI, they provide valuable relationships. They provide referrals to members. A lot of them come in and they utilize the services of the members in the room, even if they never end up joining. So that being said, in order to increase the number of new members and have new memberships, then we need to bring in the visitors. At the very least, if we have a 100% visitor closing ratio, we need to bring in 3 visitors per month. That being said, I don't know many chapters that every single visitor that joins becomes a new member. This one is something that you're going to have to really gauge for your own chapter. I can tell you in our chapter, about 1 in every 4 to 1 in every 5 visitors join. So it's somewhere between a 20 and a 25% conversion ratio. So that means that let's look on the good side and say it's a 25%, a 1 in 4. We really need to bring in 12 new visitors per month in order to have 1 in every 4 of them end up joining the chapter. So I'm going to put that consistently across the board. Once again, some of these things will help with that. The Visitors Day. Maybe we want to do some educational moments. How about an educational moment on inviting through BNI Connect? And we want to make sure that we also follow that up with registering your visitors in BNI Connect. So again, all these different mechanisms that you can use for this. Now we can start working on some of the other goals, the number of one-to-ones, the CEUs, and referrals. Now these ones actually become a lot easier as well, and a lot of times they're going to be the same, the referrals, the CEUs, and the one-to-ones. I can tell you that one thing that we subscribe to in our region is that we're looking for it, we call it the power of 1, where every member in the chapter is doing our best to bring 1 referral per week, have 1 one-to-one per week, and participate in 1 CEU per week. So that kind of makes this easy. That would be basically 4 referrals per month per member. So this makes this simple case of math. So 22 times 4 That's going to be 88. And then we could do 96, and then 104, 112, 120, and 128. So we can fill out all the goals, and of course we can come up with our mechanisms for that as well. And really these numbers are going to be the same, at least in our chapter, for one-to-ones and CEUs. So 88, 96, 104, 112, 120, and 128. And of course, we want to put our mechanisms in for that as well as we discuss those techniques. Once you get all of your goals input into BNI Connect, please make sure to save your changes. That is very important. Click the Save button. Are you sure you want to save it? Yes, I am sure I want to save this. It'll let you know that it was saved successfully. And if I go back to the Operations menu, and go back to Manage Goals, now we'll be able to start viewing the goals. By default, it's going to show you your current 6-month period. However, you can change this date to anything you'd like it to be. But it will only show 6 months at a time. Now this will give us our statistics so far. And we can see with our Burr chapter here, last month we had 97% attendance. We haven't yet submitted any POMS reports this month. I really need to work on the vice president in the Burr chapter, but we can see that we had a goal of 88 one-to-ones and we achieved 2 of them. The CEUs, the visitors, new memberships, number of members, number of referrals, and thank you for closed business. Let's take a look at a chapter that is actually utilizing this though, as opposed to just this garbage data. I'm going to go to the United States here, and there is a specific region in the United States. They have one of the highest average chapter members, and they all utilize this program. So I know I can always just take any random chapter and view their chapter goals. I'm going to go back so we can see some data, and let's look at the last 6-month period. And here we go. So this is the Direct to Success chapter in Tampa. Direct to Success will increase its membership to 45 over the next term and focus on the core success drivers and foster a strong education program. One key success driver will be bringing in qualified visitors. A strong initiative will be made for visitor to new member conversion. And their mission statement, ensure that every BNI member meets their individual goals. Every member will have the opportunity to become E-squared, which is a learning system that they have. And the chapter's leadership team will provide mechanisms to ensure that each member knows where they stand in relation to the rest of the chapter and BNI as a whole. By recruiting solid members into the chapter, re-energizing our senior members, and increasing the educational components, we will continue to grow and increase the revenue for the chapter. So some pretty inspiring words for their mission statement. And then we can also look at the various goals they have. They're shooting for 100% attendance across the board, and we can see 94, 96, 96, 98, 98, 94. So they did pretty well with that. Let's look at their total number of one-to-ones. They were looking for, 368, 210, 285. Some months they beat it by significant amounts, and some months they came a little bit under. But the important thing is that we can see where they were getting to those numbers. You can see their number of visitors, their number of new members, and their number of members in the chapter. We can see they did they grew by a net of 1 over that 6-month period, so a little bit closer to their goal of 45 members. Number of referrals goals, and thank you for closed business. And at that, we are at the bottom of the hour. So what I'd like to do is to open this up to any questions. If anybody has any questions whatsoever, I would be happy to answer those questions now. While you're thinking of any questions, just a reminder, we are recording this session. You can find it in a couple of places. The first place is click on this question mark. That will bring you over to the support site. The very first thing you'll see is the upcoming webinars, and as part of that, it'll say recorded webinars series. Just click on the month. The one from last month is already uploaded. The one from today will be put into the November section very soon. And you'll also see the rest of the webinars here, including all of the December series. A good referral for me, please let your chapters know about these webinars. I would love additional participation. And if you scroll down, you'll see a ton of other documentation and help guides. You can also see our videos directly at youtube.com/BNI Connect Global, youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. And we have a ton of videos up here, not just all of these recorded webinars, but also educational moments and other videos. So if you'd like to be notified when they are uploaded, please do subscribe to us up there. Finally, I'd love it if you gave us a like on Facebook, facebook.com/BNI Connect Global. And this has, we do tons of announcements and tips and tricks and all sorts of stuff here on BNI Connect Global on Facebook. All right, so any questions? Do we have any questions at all? All right, John asks, can you go back and change your goals? Yes, actually, you can go back and change your goals. All you do is go to that Enter Chapter Goals function, and you can go back and edit any that either you missed, or let's say that you were a bit too aggressive in doing your goals, and you came up with these really, really dream goals or BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals, and you need to go back and put some more realistic numbers in. You can absolutely go back and change that even in past dates. Don says, I thought that the GC were supposed to enter the goals. However, you indicated that they don't have access. Don, that's going to vary by region. And one of the things about BNI Connect is from a permissions and allocation of duties standpoint, it is highly customizable. So while most regions do it one way around the world, there are exceptions to that where they've delegated those responsibilities to other people. In this case, the growth coordinator, maybe in your region it is the growth coordinator that enters these goals, and more than likely your region has given the growth coordinators the permission to do so. The default is that this is usually done by the president, vice president, and secretary treasurer. But again, your mileage may vary. Awesome. Thank you, Don. All right. Any other questions? All right. If there's no other questions, I'm just going to say thank you guys so much for being here today. Our very next webinar is going to be tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow at same time, 3 p.m. Eastern, and we're going to go into the leadership team tools and reports. So all this stuff here under the operations menu, we're going to go through, and how do you enter a POMS report, and how do you assign a mentor, and how do you do the speaker rotation? We're going to go through all of that. We're also going to go through a whole bunch of the leadership reports to show you what kind of information and insights you can get about your chapter. Tomorrow's webinar, by the way, is a slightly longer webinar. It takes about 45 minutes to an hour to go through that, whereas most of these webinars take about a half hour. So if you are joining us tomorrow, please keep in mind it is a bit of a longer webinar. Again, please encourage a good referral for me. Go back to your leadership teams and let them know about this webinar tomorrow, and we can show them the kind of stuff that's accessible to them in BNI Connect. So thank you guys so much again, and I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Happy connecting, everyone.